I am Audrey, 28 years old, and despite running a multi-million-dollar tech company, I still take the bus to work. My parents never understood my choice to live, especially when I showed up to our annual family dinner in jeans, while my cousins arrived in designer outfits. When Blake mockingly asked if I was still taking public transportation, I never expected my antique watch to catch my dad's eye. The look on his face changed everything that night. If you are watching this, drop a comment telling me where you are from, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear how I silenced a room full of status-obsessed relatives with just a flick of my wrist. Growing up as the daughter of Thomas and Eleanor Hayes meant attending elite private schools, vacationing in the Hamptons, and having every material advantage a child could want. My father built his real estate empire, from scratch, turning a small inheritance into a fortune through determination and business savvy. My mother came from old money, her family name appearing on buildings across Manhattan. They provided me with every opportunity, but they also instilled in me the importance of making my own way in the world. Unlike my cousins, who were content to live off family money and connections, I was determined to build something meaningful on my own terms. After graduating from Harvard Business School, I surprised everyone by declining a six-figure job offer at my father's company. Instead, I accepted an entry-level position at a struggling tech startup. My father was confused but supportive. My mother was devastated, convinced I was throwing away my potential. My cousins, especially Blake, thought I had lost my mind. "You could be driving a Porsche by next year if you worked for Uncle Thomas," Blake said when I told him about my decision. "Instead, you will be making coffee for some nerds who will probably go bankrupt in 6 months." I just smiled and told him there were more important things in life than driving a Porsche. He looked at me like I had spoken in alien language. The startup was everything I had hoped for. Fast-paced, innovative, filled with brilliant minds working together to create something revolutionary. I thrived in that environment, quickly rising through the ranks to become product manager within 18 months. That was where I met Gerald Klein, a 65-year-old veteran entrepreneur who served as our company advisor. Gerald became the mentor I needed. While my father had taught me about business in theory, Gerald showed me its practical application in the tech world. He was brilliant, kind, and completely unimpressed by status symbols despite his enormous wealth. He drove a 10-year-old Toyota, wore the same 3 sweaters in rotation, and lived in a modest home. Yet he had founded 3 unicorn startups and was respected throughout Silicon Valley. "True wealth is invisible, Audrey," he told me once. "The moment you need to show people how successful you are, you have already failed at understanding what success means." I absorbed his philosophy like a sponge. When our startup was acquired by a tech giant 2 years later, I used my buyout money to found my own company, Klein Dynamics, naming it in honor of Gerald. He was touched by the gesture and became my first investor and board member. The first 2 years were brutal. I worked 18-hour days, lived in a tiny studio apartment, and poured every cent back into the company. I developed a platform that helped small businesses compete with corporate giants through data analysis and targeted marketing strategies. The potential was enormous, but the early days were filled with setbacks, failed pitches, and dwindling resources. Through it all, Gerald stood by me. When other investors got nervous, he remained calm. When I doubted myself, he reminded me of my vision. And when I was ready to give up, he showed up at my apartment with takeout and stories about his own early failures. On my 27th birthday, after a particularly difficult quarter that nonetheless showed promising metrics, Gerald presented me with a small box. "This has been with me through 3 companies, 2 market crashes, and 1 very public failure," he said. "Now it should be with you." Inside was his watch. Not flashy or obviously expensive, it was elegant in its simplicity. A Gerald Klein original from the limited collection he designed as a side project before he became known for tech. I recognized it immediately from articles I had read about him, but I had no idea of its true value. "Gerald, I cannot accept this," I protested. "This is worth more than my company." He laughed. "Right now, perhaps. But not for long." He fastened it around my wrist. "Promise me you will wear it when you need to remember your worth, not what others think you are worth." 3 months later, Gerald passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack. I was devastated. The watch became my most treasured possession, not for its monetary value, but because it connected me to him. I wore it every day as I navigated the company through its growth phase without his guidance. In the years since his death, Klein Dynamics had exploded. We secured major clients, expanded to 3 international offices, and were featured in every major tech publication. I was named to the Forbes 30 Under 30 list, and acquisition offers began pouring in. Through it all, I maintained Gerald's philosophy of understated success. I still lived in my modest apartment, though I had upgraded to a 1-bedroom. I still took public transportation. And I still avoided the spotlight whenever possible. My extended family remained largely unaware of my success. They knew I had started my own company, but I never discussed its growth at family gatherings, preferring to listen to my cousins boast about their latest purchases instead. My parents respected my privacy, though my father occasionally checked in on my company's public filings and seemed increasingly impressed by what he saw. The annual Hayes family dinner was a tradition started by my grandparents and continued by my father and his brother, my Uncle Richard. It was held at my parents' estate in Connecticut, a sprawling mansion that had been featured in architectural magazines. Every year, the entire extended family gathered to eat, drink, and inevitably compare achievements and acquisitions. Uncle Richard was my father's younger brother, and there had always been a competitive tension between them. While my father built his fortune through hard work and strategic risk-taking, Uncle Richard married into wealth and managed to parlay his connections into a senior position at a prestigious financial firm. Their children reflected their values. My cousins, led by Blake, measured success by the brands they wore and the cars they drove. Family dinners inevitably became showcases for their latest status symbols. As I prepared for this year's dinner, I thought about Gerald and what he would say about my anxiety over facing my family. I could almost hear his gentle laugh and his advice, "Let them have their Porsches. You are building something that will last." With that thought in mind, I dressed in my usual style. Dark jeans, a simple white blouse, minimal makeup, and Gerald's watch. I ordered an Uber and headed to Connecticut, ready to endure another evening of subtle and not-so-subtle judgment. The Uber driver whistled softly as we pulled through the ornate iron gates of my parents' estate. "Nice place," he said, navigating the long, winding driveway lined with perfectly manicured topiaries. I nodded, watching the familiar Georgian mansion come into view, its limestone facade glowing in the early evening light. I always felt a strange mix of emotions returning here. Pride in what my parents had built, nostalgia for my childhood, and a slight discomfort with the ostentation. "You can drop me at the front," I told the driver as we approached the circular driveway. A row of luxury vehicles was already parked prominently. I immediately spotted Blake's new Ferrari positioned at an angle that ensured no one could miss it. Next to it was Uncle Richard's Bentley, my cousin Amber's Range Rover, and several other high-end cars belonging to various family members. My Uber, a practical Toyota Camry, looked distinctly out of place as it pulled up to the grand entrance with its towering columns and massive oak doors. I thanked the driver, added a generous tip on the app, and stepped out into the cool autumn air. From the corner of my eye, I caught movement at one of the windows. Blake was watching my arrival, no doubt noting my transportation choice with smug satisfaction. The massive front door opened before I could ring the bell, revealing Santos, my parents' longtime butler. His formal demeanor softened into a genuine smile when he saw me. "Miss Audrey, welcome home," he said warmly. "Your parents are in the main salon with the other guests." "Thanks, Santos," I replied, returning his smile. "How are Maria and the kids?" "Very well, thank you. Diego started college this fall, first in the family." "That is wonderful," I said, genuinely pleased. I had helped Santos's son with his application essays last year. "Columbia, right, computer science?" "Yes. He speaks of you often. Your encouragement meant everything." I squeezed his arm gently before moving past him into the soaring entry hall with its marble floors and sweeping staircase. The sounds of conversation and classical music drifted from the salon. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and walked toward the gathering. My mother spotted me first. Eleanor Hayes was a striking woman in her early 60s, elegant in a navy blue designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her silver-streaked dark hair was perfectly styled, her posture impeccable. She excused herself from conversation with my aunt and glided toward me. "Audrey, darling," she said, air kissing both my cheeks. She stepped back, assessing my outfit with a quick glance. "You could have worn the Chanel dress I sent you for your birthday. It would have been perfect for tonight." "This is more comfortable, Mom," I said, giving her a real hug that she returned somewhat stiffly. "You look beautiful, as always." She sighed but smiled. "Well, at least that blouse is silk. Come say hello to everyone. Your cousin Blake just closed a major account at the firm." Of course he had. Blake's achievements were always highlighted immediately, while my own were rarely mentioned. I followed my mother into the salon, a grand room with soaring ceilings, antique furniture, and walls lined with valuable artwork. About 20 family members were already there, clustered in small groups, champagne flutes in hand. My father was engaged in conversation with Uncle Richard near the fireplace, but he looked up as I entered. Thomas Hayes was tall and distinguished, his once dark hair now mostly gray. Unlike my mother, who embraced the trappings of wealth wholeheartedly, my father maintained a certain restraint. Yes, he drove luxury cars and owned multiple homes, but there was always something slightly uncomfortable about him at these formal family gatherings, as though he had not quite forgotten his middle-class origins. "There is my girl," he said, breaking away from his brother and crossing the room to embrace me properly. His hug was warm and genuine, smelling of the same cologne he had worn throughout my childhood. "How was the drive up?" "Fine, Dad. No traffic." He nodded, studying my face closely. "You look tired? Working too hard?" "Probably," I admitted. "But things are going well." "Glad to hear it." He lowered his voice. "Your latest quarterly filing was impressive. That contract with Johnson & Williams was quite a coup." I blinked in surprise. "You saw that?" He smiled slightly. "I keep tabs on you even if you think I do not." He squeezed my shoulder. "I am proud of you, Audrey, building something on your own terms." Before I could respond, Uncle Richard approached, cocktail in hand. "Audrey, there you are. We were beginning to think you had forgotten about us successful folks." His laugh was just a little too loud, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Hello, Uncle Richard," I said, accepting his brief hug. "How are things at Westfield Financial?" "Booming. Absolutely booming. We just acquired a boutique firm in Boston, added $2 billion to our portfolio management." He took a large sip of his drink, But enough about me. How is your little startup doing? Still afloat? My father frowned slightly at his brother's condescending tone, but I just smiled. We are managing. Thanks for asking. Good, good. Persistence is important. He patted my arm in a patronizing manner. Blake is around here somewhere. He was made junior partner last month. Youngest in the firm's history. That is wonderful, I said, with all the enthusiasm I could muster. I will be sure to congratulate him. As if summoned by his name, Blake appeared at his father's side. My cousin was 32, conventionally handsome in the way of men who spend too much time at exclusive gyms and high-end barbershops. His suit was clearly bespoke, his watch ostentatiously diamond-encrusted. Cousin Audrey, he said, kissing near my cheek. Love the simple look, very authentic. Blake I responded with a nod. Congratulations on making junior partner. He straightened his already straight tie. Thanks. The Ferrari outside is my celebration present to myself. 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds. Impressive, I said, though I couldn't have cared less. Gerald's watch felt suddenly heavy on my wrist, a reminder of what truly mattered. My cousin Amber approached next, her high heels clicking against the marble floor. Audrey! Oh my God, it has been forever! She embraced me with the excessive enthusiasm of someone who has already had several glasses of champagne. I love what you have done with your hair. So natural. Amber was Blake's younger sister, 26, and already on her second husband. She worked nominally in public relations, though her job seemed to primarily involve attending charity galas and posting about them on social media. Thanks, Amber. You look well. Just back from Capri, she said, flipping her expensively highlighted hair. Alessandro has a villa there. You should see it. 6 bedrooms, infinity pool, private beach access. She leaned closer. We're thinking of buying our own place nearby. Nothing too extravagant, just a little €3 million hideaway. I nodded politely as she continued to detail the amenities of Italian luxury real estate. Over her shoulder, I could see my other cousins engaged in similar conversations. Justin was showing off his new Rolex to his sister Madison, who was scrolling through photos of her recent Maldives vacation on her phone. Aunt Pamela was describing her newly renovated Hamptons house to my mother, emphasizing the difficulty of finding reliable contractors who understood the importance of imported Italian marble. The entire room hummed with these exchanges of acquisition and achievement, a familiar symphony of competitive wealth. I stood in the midst of it, Gerald's watch on my wrist, thinking about the conference call I had scheduled the next morning with a nonprofit organization that wanted to use our platform to connect homeless individuals with employment opportunities. The contrast between these worlds made me feel like I was straddling parallel universes. A staff member appeared to announce that dinner was served, providing a welcome interruption. As we moved toward the formal dining room, my father fell into step beside me. You are quiet tonight, he observed. Just tired, I replied. End of quarter is always busy. He nodded, then added quietly, I read about your housing initiative in the Times business section, providing your platform to affordable housing advocates pro bono. That was good of you. I looked at him in surprise. He rarely mentioned specific aspects of my business. It seemed like the right thing to do, I said simply. Something like approval flickered in his eyes. Your grandfather would have done the same. He never forgot where he came from. He paused. Neither have I, despite what Richard might think. Before I could respond, we entered the dining room, where a table set for 24 gleamed with crystal silver and fine china. Name cards indicated our seating arrangements, and I was unsurprised to find myself placed between Blake and Madison. Another family dinner had officially begun. The first course arrived promptly. Seared scallops with a citrus reduction, artfully arranged on white porcelain plates. The family settled into their seats, wine glasses were filled, and the performance began. These dinners always followed the same script. Accomplishments would be casually mentioned. Acquisitions would be subtly highlighted. Status would be established and reinforced. "Madison, that necklace is stunning," Aunt Pamela said to my cousin across the table. "Is it new?" Madison touched the diamond pendant at her throat. "Oh, this yes Thomas surprised me after he closed the Peterson merger. 12 carats cushion cut. We had it custom designed by that jeweler in the city, the one who does all the work for celebrities." "How thoughtful," my mother commented. "Speaking of mergers, Richard, I heard Westfield is looking at that firm in Chicago." Uncle Richard dabbed his mouth with his napkin before answering. "Yes, negotiations are in the final stages. Blake has been instrumental in the due diligence process." All eyes turned to Blake, who adopted a modest expression that looked rehearsed. "Just doing my job." "But the acquisition will add about 30% to our annual revenue. We are looking at expanding our Pacific Rim presence next." "Blake has always had a good head for business," Uncle Richard continued. "He gets that from me, of course." My father raised an eyebrow but said nothing, taking a sip of his wine instead. I knew he was thinking about how Uncle Richard had nearly bankrupted his first investment firm before marrying into the Westfield family and being installed in a senior position at his father-in-law's company. "And Justin, dear, how is the new position at Goldman?" my mother asked, turning the spotlight to another cousin. Justin straightened his tie importantly. "Challenging, but rewarding. We just closed a $4 billion deal with a Saudi investment group. I will be flying to Riyadh next month on the company jet." The conversation continued in this vein as the second course arrived. Roasted beet salad with goat cheese and candied walnuts. I ate quietly, responding to direct questions, but otherwise remaining on the periphery of the discussion. Blake, however, seemed determined to draw me in. "So, Audrey," he said, swirling his expensive Bordeaux, "how is the entrepreneurial life treating you, still working out of that co-working space downtown?" "We actually moved to our own offices last year," I replied, "in the Flatiron district." "Oh, must be expensive. Those rents are outrageous." I nodded noncommittally. "It works for us." "And how many employees do you have now?" he pressed. "Still, just you and those 2 programmers." "We have grown a bit." Blake exchanged a knowing look with his father. "Well, startups are always a gamble. 90% fail within the first year, you know. The fact that you have lasted this long is actually quite impressive." "Thank you for the vote of confidence," I said dryly. Aunt Pamela leaned forward, her expression one of practiced concern. "Darling, you know if you ever need help, the family is here for you. There is no shame in admitting when it is time to try something else. I am sure your father could find a suitable position for you at Hayes Development." I felt a flash of irritation, but kept my expression neutral. "That is very kind, Aunt Pamela, but we are doing fine." "Of course, dear," she said, patting my hand in a way that suggested she did not believe me. "I just worry. A young woman should be thinking about stability, building a future. Look at Madison. She and Thomas just purchased that lovely brownstone in Brooklyn Heights." Madison beamed. "The renovation is costing a fortune, but it will be worth it. We are putting in a wine cellar and a home theater. You should come see it when it is finished, Audrey. Maybe it will inspire you." I smiled tightly. "That sounds nice." You know, Uncle Roger chimed in from further down the table. "Entrepreneurship is all well and good, but there is something to be said for the security of an established firm. My college roommate tried the startup route. Bright fellow had what seemed like a good idea. sank every penny he had into it. Now he manages a branch of Bank of America in New Jersey. Several family members nodded sagely at this cautionary tale. I remember when you first announced you were starting your own company, Blake said, cutting into his perfectly cooked salmon as the main course was served. What was it again? Some kind of data analysis for small businesses? That is right, I confirmed, taking a bite of my own meal. Seems like a limited market, he observed. Small businesses do not usually have much budget for that sort of thing. Now, if you were targeting enterprise clients, he trailed off, shaking his head slightly. We have a mixed client base, I said simply. Blake was not deterred. I just wonder about the viability long term, especially in this economy. Venture capital has dried up considerably since the interest rates went up. I thought about the $20 million in funding we had secured last quarter and the offers from 3 major VC firms that I was currently considering. We manage. My father cleared his throat. Audrey's company is doing quite well, actually. I have been impressed with their growth metrics. Blake looked surprised, then quickly recovered. Well, good for her. It is important to follow your passion, even if it means certain lifestyle adjustments. Madison picked up on his tone immediately. Yes, I admire your commitment to simplicity, Audrey. It must be so grounding to live like regular people. I caught my father watching me, something unreadable in his expression. My mother looked uncomfortable, clearly torn between defending her daughter and avoiding any hint of family discord at her meticulously planned dinner. There is dignity in living within one's means, I replied evenly, something Gerald always emphasized. Gerald, Uncle Richard asked. Gerald Klein, I explained. He was my mentor. He passed away last year. Oh, the tech guy, Blake said dismissively. I read about him. Made a fortune in software or something, right? Lived like a pauper despite being worth billions. Kind of eccentric. I felt a surge of anger at hearing Gerald described this way, but kept my composure. He believed that wealth should be measured by impact, not possessions. Blake snorted. Easy to say when you have billions in the bank. I bet he still flew private and had houses all over the world. Actually, he flew commercial and owned one modest home in Palo Alto, I corrected. He put most of his money into his foundation for educational access. Well, to each their own, Blake said with a shrug. But there is nothing wrong with enjoying the fruits of your labor. Life is short. What is the point of success if you cannot show it off a little? As conversation shifted to Madison's upcoming trip to Paris, I felt the weight of Gerald's watch on my wrist. I thought about his quiet confidence, his genuine interest in people regardless of their status, his belief that true success was measured by the lives you improved, not the possessions you accumulated. The contrast between his values and those being expressed around this table could not have been starker. My reverie was interrupted by my cousin Amber, who was describing her new Mercedes in loving detail. The interior is completely customized. Took 3 months to get exactly right. But when you are driving through the Hamptons, it is worth it to make the right impression. Blake nodded in agreement. Image is everything in our world. The right car, the right address, the right connections. It all signals your place in the hierarchy. He turned to me with a smile that did not reach his eyes. Speaking of which, Audrey, I noticed you arrived by Uber today. Still taking the bus around the city, too. The table fell, momentarily silent, all eyes turning toward me. The question hung in the air, its condescension unmistakable. I saw my mother's embarrassed expression, my aunt's poorly concealed pity, my uncle's smug satisfaction at his son's pointed query. But it was my father's reaction that surprised me. His attention had shifted from Blake's face to my wrist, where Gerald's watch was partially visible beneath the cuff of my blouse. His eyes widened slightly, his fork pausing halfway to his mouth. He was staring at the watch with an expression of stunned recognition. Blake, misinterpreting my father's reaction as embarrassment on my behalf, pressed his advantage. I mean, there is frugality, and then there is unnecessary suffering. Public transportation in New York can be so unpredictable, not to mention the types of people you encounter. I opened my mouth to respond, but at that moment, my father found his voice. "Is that what I think it is?" my father asked, his voice cutting through Blake's commentary. He was still staring at my wrist with an intensity that drew everyone's attention. I glanced down at Gerald's watch, suddenly self-conscious. "What do you mean?" "Your watch," he said, setting down his fork deliberately. "May I see it?" The table had gone silent. Blake looked confused by this unexpected interruption of his moment of triumph. I hesitated, then extended my arm across the table. My father leaned forward, examining the timepiece with growing amazement. "This is a Gerald Klein original," he said quietly, "from his limited first collection." Uncle Richard frowned. The tech entrepreneur who died last year, he made watches. Before he entered the tech world, my father explained, still studying my watch. He was a horologist first, created a small collection of handcrafted timepieces before founding his first company. Only 50 were ever made. He looked up at me, his expression a mix of shock and newfound respect. "How did you come to possess this?" All eyes were now on me, the dynamics of the table completely shifted. Blake's earlier mockery hung awkwardly in the air. "Gerald gave it to me," I said simply. "Before he died, he was my mentor and an early investor in my company." My father sat back in his chair. "Do you have any idea what this is worth?" I nodded. "I know it is valuable, but that is not why I wear it." "That," my father said, addressing the entire table now, "is a $2 million watch. Possibly more given its provenance, and the fact that Klein's death has made his collection even more sought after." A collective gasp went around the table. Blake's mouth literally fell open. Madison dropped her fork with a clatter. Aunt Pamela started coughing on her wine. "Oh, this old thing," I said, with a casual shrug, pulling my sleeve back slightly to better display the watch. "I wear it every day. Gerald insisted that beautiful things should be used, not stored away." My father was shaking his head in amazement. "The craftsmanship is extraordinary. Each one was entirely handmade by Klein himself. The movement is based on a revolutionary design of his own creation. Collectors have been searching for these for years. Most are in private collections or museums." Uncle Richard was staring at the watch with new interest. $2 million on your wrist. You should have that insured, Audrey." "It is," I assured him. "Gerald took care of that when he gave it to me. He said it was the first thing he ever created that truly mattered to him." Blake had recovered enough to join the conversation, his tone completely transformed. "I had no idea you were close to Gerald Klein. He was a legend in the industry." "He was more than that," I said quietly. "He was a friend. He believed in what I was building when few others did." Which was what exactly Uncle Richard asked, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by genuine curiosity. "You have always been rather vague about your company." I took a sip of water, considering how much to reveal. Gerald had always advised strategic transparency. Perhaps it was time. "We developed a proprietary algorithm that helps businesses optimize their operations through predictive analytics," I explained. "We started with small businesses because they were underserved in this space, but we have expanded significantly. We now work with several Fortune 500 companies, 3 major healthcare systems, and the federal government." My mother blinked in surprise. "The federal government?" You never mentioned that. The contract was finalized last month, I said. We will be implementing our platform across multiple agencies over the next year. It is our largest deal to date. How large? Blake asked, unable to contain himself. I met his gaze directly. 900 million over 5 years. Another stunned silence fell over the table. My father was looking at me with open pride now. My mother appeared completely bewildered. But you still live in that tiny apartment in the city, she said, confusion evident in her voice. And you take the bus? I smiled. I like my apartment. It is close to our offices, and I can walk to my favorite coffee shop. As for public transportation, it is efficient and better for the environment. Gerald took the bus every day of his life, even after he became a billionaire. A true Klein disciple, my father murmured, looking at me with new understanding. Blake was struggling to reconcile this new information with his previous perception of me. So your company, it is successful then? I nodded. Very. We are currently valued at $1.8 billion after our last funding round. I maintain majority ownership. Uncle Richard choked on his drink. Aunt Pamela's eyes widened to an almost comical degree. Madison was furiously typing something into her phone, probably searching for information about my company. You are a billionaire, Blake asked incredulously. On paper, potentially, I clarified. Most of my net worth is tied to the company's valuation. I take a reasonable salary and live accordingly. But why keep it a secret? Amber asked, genuinely perplexed. If I had that kind of success, everyone would know about it. I thought about Gerald and his quiet confidence, his disinterest in impressing others. Because true success is not measured by what others think of you, but by the impact you create and the problems you solve. Our platform has helped thousands of small businesses survive and thrive. It has optimized healthcare delivery in underserved communities. That matters more than the valuation. My father was nodding slowly. Klein's philosophy. Focus on the work, not the rewards. I always admired that about him. Blake seemed unable to process this revelation. His entire worldview, which placed me firmly at the bottom of the family hierarchy, had been upended in the span of minutes. But the clothes you wear, the way you live. Our choices, I finished for him. Just as your choices reflect your values. Gerald taught me that we reveal our true selves, not through what we say, but through what we prioritize. The dinner continued, but the dynamic had fundamentally changed. Family members who had barely acknowledged me earlier were now finding reasons to engage me in conversation. Questions about my company, about Gerald, about my plans for the future came from all directions. Through it all, I maintained the same calm demeanor, neither gloating over this shift nor playing into their suddenly heightened interest. As the dessert course was being served, Blake leaned toward me, his voice low enough that others could not hear. I owe you an apology, Audrey. I have been condescending and rude. I assumed that because you did not flaunt your success, you had none to flaunt. I studied him for a moment, seeing past the expensive suit, and practiced charm to the insecurity beneath. Success means different things to different people, Blake. I do not judge your choices. I would appreciate the same courtesy. He nodded, looking somewhat chastened. The watch really is extraordinary. Klein must have thought very highly of you. I touched the timepiece gently. It reminds me every day of what matters. Not its value, but what it represents. Craftsmanship, integrity, creating something meaningful that lasts. As I said these words, I caught my father watching me from across the table, a thoughtful expression on his face. For perhaps the first time he was seeing me, not as his little girl who needed protection or guidance, but as a woman who had forged her own path and found success on her own terms. In that moment of recognition, I felt something shift between us, a new foundation of mutual respect taking shape. The watch that had once been Gerald's silent companion was now telling my story, revealing truths I had kept hidden, not out of shame, but out of a desire to be valued for who I was, rather than what I owned. As the evening progressed, I found myself grateful for its quiet presence on my wrist, a tangible connection to the mentor who had shaped not just my business philosophy, but my approach to life itself. As the dinner plates were cleared and coffee was served, the conversation inevitably circled back to my watch and its previous owner. Uncle Richard, who had been uncharacteristically quiet for the past several minutes, finally voiced what many were clearly thinking. "I still cannot wrap my head around the fact that Gerald Klein was your mentor," he said, stirring cream into his coffee. "He was notoriously selective about his time and investments. How exactly did that relationship develop?" All eyes turned to me once again. Even the staff paused in their duties, sensing that something significant was unfolding at the table. My father leaned forward, slightly clearly interested in hearing the full story himself. "I met Gerald at Innovate Tech, the startup where I worked after graduation," I began. "He was brought in as an advisor during a particularly difficult quarter. The company was burning through cash, and our product development had stalled." "I remember that company," Blake interjected. "They were acquired by Google eventually, right?" I nodded. "For $300 million. But at the time, we were on the verge of collapse. Gerald came in and completely transformed our approach. He had this ability to cut through complexity and identify the core value proposition." "That was his genius," my father agreed. "I heard him speak at a conference once. Remarkable clarity of thought." "He noticed that I asked different questions than everyone else in the room," I continued. "After one particularly contentious meeting, he asked me to walk with him to get coffee. We ended up talking for 3 hours. By the end of that conversation, he had offered to mentor me." "Just like that?" Uncle Richard asked skeptically. "Gerald made decisions quickly when he saw potential," I explained. "He told me later that he recognized something in me that reminded him of himself at my age. A certain way of looking at problems." My mother, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. "And he invested in your company when you started it." "He was my first investor," I confirmed. $500,000 on a handshake. No formal pitch, no detailed business plan. He said he was investing in me, not just the idea. "That is not how business typically works," Uncle Richard pointed out, unable to hide his disapproval of such unorthodox methods. I smiled. Gerald was not typical. He believed that the best innovations come from trust and freedom, not rigid structures and endless documentation. He gave me that initial funding and told me to build something meaningful. His only conditions were that I maintain control of the company and that I use a portion of any profits to help others. "The foundation you established last year," my father said, nodding with understanding. "The one focused on tech education in underserved communities? That was part of your agreement with Klein." "Yes," I acknowledged, surprised that he knew about it. Though I would have done it anyway, Gerald showed me that success creates responsibility. Madison, who had been researching on her phone throughout this exchange, looked up with wide eyes. According to Forbes, Klein Dynamics is projected to reach $3 billion in valuation by next quarter. "There are rumors of an IPO." She stared at me. "You named your company after him." "It seemed appropriate," I said simply. "His philosophy is the foundation of everything we do." "But why keep all of this so?" Private Aunt Pamela asked, gesturing vaguely toward my modest attire. You could be living in a penthouse, driving luxury cars, enjoying the best of everything. I considered how to explain a mindset so different from the one that dominated this table. When Gerald gave me this watch, he told me something I will never forget. He said, "The moment you feel the need to prove your worth to others is the moment you have forgotten what you are truly worth. I do not need to display my success to validate it." My father was nodding slowly, a new appreciation in his eyes. Klein always understood that true power lies in knowing your value without needing external validation. It is why he was respected even by his competitors. Exactly, I agreed. And he lived that philosophy every day. The most valuable lessons he taught me had nothing to do with business strategy or technology. They were about integrity, purpose, and the responsibility that comes with success. Blake, who had been unusually subdued, finally spoke up. "So the watch. It must have incredible sentimental value beyond its price." "It is priceless to me," I confirmed. Gerald wore it while building $3 billion companies. He said it kept him grounded, reminded him of the craftsmanship and patience required to create something of lasting value. "And now you wear it while building your own empire," my father observed with a small smile. I shook my head. "Not an empire, a solution. Our platform helps businesses operate more efficiently, which saves jobs, reduces waste, and improves working conditions. The valuation is just a byproduct, not the goal." Uncle Richard looked skeptical, but my father was nodding with growing understanding. I could see a shift in how he was looking at me, a new respect, mingled with something that might have been regret for not having seen this side of me sooner. "The federal contract you mentioned," he said. "That was the one announced last month to modernize agency operations and reduce governmental waste." "Yes," I confirmed. "We beat out several major tech firms for the bid. Our solution will save taxpayers an estimated $12 billion over 10 years while improving service delivery." "That was your company," Uncle Richard exclaimed. "It was all over the financial news. They never mentioned you by name." "I prefer to keep a low profile," I explained. "Our work speaks for itself." "But surely now, with this level of success, you will upgrade your lifestyle." Aunt Pamela pressed, still seemingly unable to comprehend my choices. "Perhaps a nicer apartment at least." I smiled politely. "I like where I live. It is convenient and has everything I need." Gerald lived in the same modest house for 30 years, even as his net worth grew to billions. He taught me that excess consumption rarely correlates with increased happiness. "So you just work all the time?" Madison asked, her tone suggesting she found the concept depressing. "I work on things that matter to me," I clarified. "But I also travel, read extensively, volunteer, and spend time with friends who value me for who I am, not what I own. My life is very full." "And the foundation?" my father asked. "Tell us more about that." I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. This was something I was truly proud of. The Klein Foundation for Technological Equity. We provide comprehensive tech education and mentorship to students from under-resourced communities, full scholarships, equipment, internships, and ongoing support. Our first cohort of 50 students is halfway through the program. They are extraordinary. 50 students, Uncle Richard said. That seems modest for someone of your means. We are just getting started, I explained. The program is intensive and personalized. We want to refine our approach before expanding. But our 10-year plan is to reach 10,000 students annually across the country. 10,000 lives changed, my father mused. That is a significant legacy. More significant than any possession could be, I agreed. Gerald understood that. His greatest pride wasn't in the companies he built, but in the people he helped develop, the opportunities he created. As coffee concluded, and the family began to move toward the library for after-dinner drinks, I noticed a distinct change in how people were interacting with me. There was a new deference in their manner, a recalibration of my position within the family hierarchy. It was exactly what I had always wanted to avoid, being valued for my bank account rather than my character. Blake sidled up to me as we walked through the hallway lined with family portraits. "I feel like I need to completely reassess everything I thought I knew about you," he admitted. "All this time I was pitying you, thinking you could not afford the lifestyle the rest of us enjoy. And it turns out you could buy and sell most of us several times over." I stopped and turned to face him directly. "That is exactly why I do not discuss my company's valuation or my personal finances, Blake. I do not want to be treated differently based on my net worth. It is the least interesting thing about me." He looked genuinely perplexed. "But is not that what we all want? Recognition of our success? Acknowledgement of our achievements? I get all the recognition I need from seeing our platform make a difference for the businesses that use it," I told him. "From watching our foundation students thrive. From knowing that Gerald would be proud of what I have built." Blake glanced down at my watch, then back at my face. "I think I have a lot to learn from you, Audrey." For the first time that evening, his words seemed completely sincere. The family had migrated to the library, a wood-paneled room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather armchairs, and a well-stocked bar. Conversations had splintered into smaller groups, though I noticed I was now being included in discussions that would have previously excluded me. Uncle Richard was suddenly interested in my thoughts on market trends. Aunt Pamela wanted to introduce me to her friend who ran a charitable foundation. Even Justin, who had barely acknowledged my existence at previous gatherings, was asking about potential investment opportunities. I accepted a glass of whiskey from the bar and found a quiet corner, needing a moment to process the evening's shift. The revelation of my success had altered the family dynamic in ways that both amused and troubled me. I was the same person I had been when I arrived by Uber hours earlier, yet I was now being treated entirely differently. "Quite a performance," my father said, appearing beside me with his own drink in hand. "Mind if I join you?" I gestured to the empty chair next to mine. "Please do." He settled in, taking a thoughtful sip of his scotch. "You know, I always respected your desire for privacy, for making your own way, but I had no idea you were keeping quite this much under wraps." "Would it have made a difference if you had known?" I asked. He considered this. "To me, I have always been proud of you, Audrey, but I might have run interference with the rest of the family a bit more effectively, spared you some of the condescension." "I can handle condescension," I assured him. "It is the sudden shift in treatment now, that they know about the company valuation, that bothers me more." My father nodded understanding immediately. The curse of wealth. People see the money, not the person. It is why I have always been suspicious of new friends who appear after business deals are announced. "Gerald had the same problem," I said. "He told me once that he could count on one hand the number of people who truly knew him, not his net worth." "He sounds like a remarkable mentor." My father swirled his drink thoughtfully. "I wish I had taken the time to know him better. We met at conferences occasionally, but never had a real conversation." "You would have liked him," I said. "He was brilliant, but unpretentious, completely authentic." "Like his protege," my father observed with a small smile. "You know, watching you tonight, I saw so much of myself at your age. The determination to build something meaningful, to be judged on merit rather than background." This surprised me. My father had always seemed comfortable with his wealth, with the privilege it afforded. "Really? But you embrace all of this." I gestured around at the opulent room. He chuckled. Your mother embraces it. I tolerate it because it makes her happy. But between us, I would be perfectly content in a place a quarter this size. He leaned closer. Why do you think I spend so much time at the office or the fishing cabin in Vermont? All this, he waved his hand. It was never what motivated me. I had no idea, I admitted. We have that in common, it seems. The ability to keep our true selves somewhat hidden. He took another sip of his drink. Though perhaps we have both been too good at it. I should have seen what you were building, should have recognized your achievements sooner. You saw enough, I assured him. You checked those quarterly filings, apparently. He smiled. Professional curiosity at first, then genuine admiration as I realized what you were accomplishing. But I respected your privacy, your desire to stand on your own merits. I did not want to intrude. I appreciated that I said honestly. It meant everything to build this on my own terms. My father's expression grew serious. The watch. It really was Klein's personal timepiece. I nodded, extending my wrist so he could see it again in the warm light of the library. He gave it to me on my 27th birthday, said it had been with him through everything, and now it should be with me. My father studied it with expert eyes. The craftsmanship is extraordinary. I had heard rumors about his collection, but few have ever been photographed or documented. Most were given to close friends or family, never sold. He made this one himself from scratch, I told him. Spent 2 years perfecting the movement while launching his first tech company. He said it taught him patience and precision. Values that served him well clearly. My father looked from the watch to me, and now they serve you. Our conversation was interrupted as Blake approached, his demeanor noticeably humbler than earlier in the evening. Excuse me, Uncle Thomas. Could I borrow Audrey for a moment? My father looked to me. I nodded and he stood. Of course, I should check on your mother anyway. She is probably already planning how to redecorate your childhood bedroom now that she knows you can afford priceless art. He winked at me before walking away. Blake took the vacated seat, his usual confidence subdued. I wanted to apologize properly, Audrey. My behavior tonight, and frankly at every family gathering for years, has been inexcusable. I studied him, trying to determine his sincerity. Apology accepted. But I am curious what exactly you are apologizing for. He looked taken aback. For treating you like you were less successful, less accomplished than me. For the comments about the bus, your lifestyle choices. All of it. And if my company was worth $10,000 instead of nearly $2 billion, would you still be apologizing? I asked mildly. Blake had the grace to look embarrassed. Aye, that is a fair question. It is the only question that matters, I pointed out. Because if you are only sorry because you discovered I am wealthier than you imagined, then you have missed the entire point. He was quiet for a moment, genuinely reflecting on my words. You are right, he finally admitted. I have been measuring success, measuring people by all the wrong metrics. It is how I was raised, but that is no excuse. It is never too late to reevaluate your values, I told him, my tone softening. Gerald was 40 before he had his epiphany about wealth and status. Completely transformed his approach to life and business. I would like to hear more about him sometime, Blake said. About his philosophy. If you would be willing to share. I would like that, I said, somewhat surprised by his genuine interest. As Blake excused himself, my mother approached, looking slightly flustered. Audrey, darling, I feel absolutely terrible about all the little comments I have made over the years about your apartment, your clothes, your lifestyle choices. She sat down beside me, taking my hands in hers. If I had known about your success— Mom, I interrupted gently, that is exactly why I did not tell you. I wanted you to accept my choices for what they were, not because they came with a certain valuation. She looked confused. But surely you understand that we only want what is best for you, to see you living beneath your means when you could have everything you want. This is what I want, I assured her. A meaningful business that solves real problems. A foundation that creates opportunities for deserving students. A life focused on purpose rather than possessions. But you could have both, she insisted. Purpose and beautiful things. I touched Gerald's watch. I have both. This is the most beautiful thing I own, and I cherish it, not for its market value, but for what it represents. The same is true of my company, my foundation, my relationships. My mother sighed, clearly still struggling to understand. Well, at the very least, you must let me help you find a nicer apartment, something befitting your position. I could not help but laugh. Some things never change. I love you, Mom, just as you are, even when you are trying to redecorate my life. She smiled reluctantly. And I love you, even when you are stubbornly rejecting perfectly good Chanel dresses. As the evening wound down, I found myself engaged in more genuine conversations than I had experienced at any previous family gathering. Some relatives were clearly still processing the revelation of my success, adjusting their perception of me. Others seemed to be reconsidering their own definitions of achievement. And a few, like my father, were connecting with me on a deeper level, seeing beyond both my deliberate modesty and the company valuation to the person I had become. When it came time to leave, I ordered another Uber, declining offers from several relatives to drive me to the city. My father walked me to the door while we waited for the car to arrive. You have given them all something to think about tonight, he observed. Myself included. That was never my intention, I said. I just wanted to be treated like a person, not a bank account, positive or negative. He nodded thoughtfully. Gerald Klein's greatest legacy may not be his companies or even his watches, but what he taught you about the true meaning of success. He placed a hand on my shoulder. I would like to see your office sometime. Meet your team. Learn more about what you are building. I would like that, I said, genuinely pleased by the suggestion. How about next week I could give you the tour, introduce you to everyone? It is a date, he agreed as my Uber pulled up. And Audrey, keep wearing that watch. It is exactly where it belongs. As I settled into the back seat of the car, I glanced down at Gerald's timepiece, thinking about how objects, like people, contain multitudes. To most of my family, the watch had transformed me from a struggling entrepreneur to a serious player in a single moment of recognition. But to me it remained what it had always been, a connection to a mentor who had shown me that the truest measure of success was not what you accumulated, but what you contributed. 3 weeks after the revelatory family dinner, I found myself sitting in my office overlooking Madison Avenue. The space was modern, but understated, with glass walls, clean lines, and functional furniture. No expensive art adorned the walls. Just enlarged photographs of our team members working with clients, visual reminders of the real people impacted by our technology. The visit from my father had gone better than I could have hoped. He had arrived early, taken the full tour, met with my executive team, and asked thoughtful questions about our technology and business model. I had watched with pride as he engaged with our developers, showing genuine interest in their work and vision. By the end of the day, he was exchanging contact information, with our CTO making plans to introduce him to potential partners. You have built something remarkable here, he had told me, as we stood looking out over the city from our rooftop deck. Not just the technology or the business, but the culture. These people believe in what they are doing. That was always the goal, I had replied. to create something meaningful, something that matters. Now, as I reviewed the final plans for our foundation's new headquarters, I reflected on how much had changed since that dinner. Not in my day-to-day life, which remained largely the same, but in my relationships with my family. My father and I spoke several times a week now, discussing business strategy foundation initiatives, and occasionally the finer points of watch collecting a shared interest we had discovered. My mother had finally accepted that I would not be moving to a penthouse anytime soon, though she had managed to slip a few designer pieces into my wardrobe just for special occasions. Most surprising was the evolution in my relationship with Blake. True to his word, he had reached out to learn more about Gerald's philosophy. We had met for coffee several times, and I had been impressed by his genuine desire to reconsider his priorities. He had even begun volunteering with a local youth coding program, discovering a talent for teaching that surprised us both. The larger family dynamic had shifted as well. At a cousin's birthday celebration the previous weekend, I had noticed less emphasis on material acquisitions and more substantial conversations. Whether this change would last remained to be seen, but it was a promising start. My assistant knocked lightly on my door, interrupting my thoughts. "Your 2 o'clock is here. The high school student you mentioned." "Send her in," I said, standing to greet my visitor. Zoe entered my office nervously, a 16-year-old with bright eyes and a determined set to her shoulders. She had applied to our foundation's mentorship program with an impressive proposal for using data analytics to address food insecurity in urban neighborhoods. "Miss Hayes," she said, extending her hand formally, "thank you so much for meeting with me." "Audrey, please," I corrected, gently gesturing for her to take a seat. "I was impressed by your application, Zoe. Your approach to mapping food deserts using multiple data points was innovative." She brightened visibly at the praise. "My family relies on food assistance programs, so I know firsthand how challenging access can be. I want to create solutions, not just identify problems." As she outlined her ideas, I was struck by her passion and clarity of purpose. She reminded me of myself at that age, though she faced economic barriers I had never experienced. This was exactly the kind of student Gerald had wanted, to support someone with the vision and drive to create meaningful change. "How would you feel about being the first participant in our new direct mentorship program?" I asked when she finished her presentation. "You would work directly with our data science team one afternoon a week, developing your project with professional guidance. There is a stipend involved, of course." Her eyes widened. "Are you serious? That would change everything for me?" "Completely serious," I assured her. "Your idea has real potential. With the right support and resources, it could help thousands of families." As we discussed the details, I was conscious of Gerald's watch on my wrist, a tangible reminder of the responsibility that came with success. In helping Zoe develop her project, I was honoring his legacy in the most meaningful way possible by creating opportunity for the next generation of problem solvers. After Zoe left practically floating with excitement, I called my father to tell him about the new mentorship initiative. He listened with interest, then surprised me with his response. "I would like to contribute to the foundation," he said. "Not just financially, though, that too, if needed, but with time. I have experience that might be valuable to these young entrepreneurs." "That would be wonderful," I told him, genuinely moved by the offer. "The students would benefit enormously from your business expertise." "And I suspect I would benefit from their fresh perspectives," he replied. "Your dinner revelation did more than just surprise the family, Audrey. It made me reevaluate how I measure success both in myself and others. I want to be part of building something that lasts beyond balance sheets and property portfolios." As we finalized plans for his involvement, I thought about how one evening, one moment of truth, had created ripples that continued to expand outward. My decision to live, according to Gerald's philosophy, had influenced not just my own life, but increasingly the lives of those around me. Later that evening, as I rode the subway home, I studied the diverse faces of my fellow passengers. A construction worker still in his work clothes, a nurse in scrubs, students with backpacks, a woman in a business suit, similar to my own, each with their own story, their own measure of what mattered. Gerald had moved through the world this way, seeing people rather than positions, value rather than valuables. In my apartment that night, I took off the watch and held it in my palm, feeling its weight and significance. It had become far more than a timepiece to me. It was a compass guiding my decisions and priorities. A reminder that true wealth lay not in what you possessed, but in what you contributed, not in how you were perceived, but in how you lived your values. The watch would never hang in a museum or be stored in a safe. It would continue to accompany me through board meetings and foundation events, through family dinners and quiet evenings. It would mark the hours of my life, as it had marked Gerald's, a witness to the creation of something meaningful and lasting. As I prepared for bed, my phone chimed with a message from Blake. He had just finished his first solo teaching session at the coding program and was exhilarated by the experience. "I think I finally understand what Gerald meant about impact over image," he wrote. "Thank you for showing me a different way to measure success." I smiled as I replied, thinking about how authentic connections and genuine purpose were the true markers of a life well lived. The watch had caught my father's eye at that fateful dinner, but what truly mattered was the philosophy it represented. The understanding that our worth is not determined by our wealth, but by our actions and their impact on others. Have you ever had a moment when something you owned revealed more about you than you intended? Or a time when others' perceptions of you changed dramatically based on new information? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey of authentic success resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more stories about finding true value in a world obsessed with appearances. Remember that the most precious things we own are not measured by their price tags, but by the meaning they hold in our hearts. Thank you for listening, and until next time, may you always know your true worth beyond any number in your bank account.